Hey guys, hope everyone is doing well. So I'm here with Dan. Um, we are, for those who don't know, we're working together on our Patreon, and we thought we get a lot of questions of people asking what are the types of things that are in the Patreon. So we thought it would be a nice thing for people if we posted some of this last month's Patreon discussion on our respective YouTube channels, just so that you all could see the types of things we talk about in the Zoom, to see if this is something that you'd like to sign up for. So if you sign up for our Patreon, you get this once a month. We have this Zoom discussion. It's about a 3-hour discussion or so. We're going to be showing you about an 18-minute or so. We'll see what it is completely after editing, but roughly 18-minute snippet of what we call the analytics part of the analytics portion, where we provide some data, and then after that we go into a question and answer period, discussion period. It's a Zoom call, so everyone, a number of people put on their face cams and put on their mics, and they get to ask us questions sort of in person over Zoom. We get to hear your voices and have a little bit of discussion. And I actually do a little bit of a segment each month on a non-Pokemon TCG, non-sports cards, lots of different things. So you get all of that, and you get our, which might even be becoming more valuable over time, but our Discord, access to the Discord, where it's a nice group of friendly people talking about a lot of things, sharing a lot of info with people. Dan and I are on there daily, answering questions, just kind of in touch with people. And I would say probably about 3 times a month, maybe right now, we do some sort of event. We're trying every month, if we can, to do sort of PWCC auctions where we all kind of hang out in the voice chat and talk. And we're also trying to do, we just kind of sporadically sometimes just kind of like go in there, talk, like if an event happens, we might go in there and I'll have a conversation about it. But otherwise, there's constant conversation going on just in all of the chats, and we're sort of engaged in that, but not necessarily leading all of it. Anything you want to add, Dan, before we go into the clip to show them what some of your analytics? If you want to, I guess you could introduce what the clip is about.
Yeah, so for November, what I did was I compiled a lot of information that was scattered across the PSA blog and in some podcasts that Nat was in, and I used that to put together a visual representation of how the backlog was built, and then where it stands today, projecting a little bit out into the future, and just kind of a deeper dive video than I'm able to do on YouTube. As Jake mentioned, it's a long format, 3-hour meeting where the analytics portion comprises the first 30 to 60 minutes or so, and then we have the discussion afterwards. But yeah, anyways, at the end of this, we're going to cut to that video highlight of the analytics. And if that's something that interests you, if you want to get involved in those monthly conversations, feel free to look in the description for the link to the Patreon.
Yeah, and we may do these sort of occasionally. We're not going to probably show snippets every month, but occasionally we might show some of these snippets or share portions that we think maybe are also just particularly useful, for people on our main channels as well. So yeah, so I hope you guys enjoy this clip. Without further ado, now the clip should appear. So enjoy that, and either way, continue to appreciate all the support, watching both our channels, signing up for Patreon, clicking the links below. Thank you. You allow us to keep doing it.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks.
What we've got here is I did a little bit of a compilation of data as well as projecting a little bit in the next tab. So I think there's a lot of, I guess I'll just go through my notes here. My goal with this presentation is to visualize the state of PSA's backlog and use that to kind of gain insight on the future, where we might head. This first tab, I also showed you a little bit of how we've got to where we are. Common questions I see that I seek to address with this: how big is and how big was the PSA backlog? It is huge and it was massive. We'll get into exact numbers in the next sheet. When are my bulk back? When are my bulk cards coming back? And when are bulk services coming back? One thing I've noticed since the shutdown in March, I feel like I've seen a lot of unrealistic expectations. So I just want to, again, kind of, a lot of people say the numbers, but when you don't see it like in a chart form to kind of put it all in the context, even myself, before I put this together, I didn't really have a complete grasp on the sheer magnitude of what we're dealing with. The first chart here, pretty basic, pretty simple. These are actual numbers that I grabbed from a Nat Turner podcast or from PSA's own website. So January 1st, 2020, they stood at 421 employees. Shortly before shutdown earlier this year, they were at 783. And then just the other night when I was updating this data, 1,071 employees strong. So you can see they are scaling quite quickly. They're doing what they can on that front, hiring new employees in an attempt to catch up. This is kind of a summation of what you see here, as well as it goes back a bit further. So in 1991, PSA opened for business and started authenticating cards. In 1998, they released an article saying that they had authenticated their 1 millionth collectible. And then again, all these numbers are like actual numbers that they put out in blog posts, or when you hit a big milestone like that, it's a lot of times they were authenticating like a really prominent Jordan rookie, or I don't remember what the 10 millionth, 20 millionth were, but every time that they did it, they did a big article, big news story to get all the advertisement they could for themselves. So as it stands right now, we'll get into it a little bit more when we talk about the websites I use to track and pull some of this data. But the other night when I pulled data, we were at about 38 million cards graded, and that's where the blue line takes us through. And then the green, yellow, and red are projections based off where we are and where we might scale to. So the red line is scaling with a linear, just 10 million cards per year. That's as I mentioned, by the time 2021 is over, we will have graded 7.5 million cards in 2021. But our current like monthly pace is on target for, if we hold that through 2022, it would be 10 million cards graded. And then people have probably heard Nat has released, he's mentioned in a couple podcasts, they're doing 40,000 cards a day, which is roughly 10 million a year. His target is double that. So if we were to reach Nat's 20 million per year and then just kind of stay there, by 2025, we would have graded 130 million cards. So that's just where I think we'll end up in reality, is likely somewhere in between the red and green lines. I just kind of demonstrated the two bounds. You could make an argument that 10 million cards might be an overshoot for what the actual demand is. So, I mean, I could even be convinced that there should be a lower line here if we were to fall off and not be able to stick with the 10 million per year. But that's,
and this is something we can, this will be, a number of the things we're doing here will be something that we'll check back in, 3 months, 6 months, whenever we feel like that it would be a good time to sort of check back in, and we'll sort of show you the progress, and also refer back to something like this and see kind of how accurate, we were, how accurate it was, and kind of give our perspectives on why that might be.
But yeah, as you can see, we graded 38 million cards through the other day. If we stick with where we're at within the next 4 years, we'll grade as many as we graded in the first 30. And if we expand to Nat's stated goal of 20 million per year, we'll grade more cards in 2022 and 2023 than we had in the first. I'm saying we as if I work for PSA. PSA will grade more cards in 2022 and 2023 than they graded in the first 30 years of operation. So just again, trying to demonstrate the sheer scale of what we're dealing with. And then since this is primarily a Pokenomics, I mean, it's a Pokemon Patreon. In 2019.
And let me just mention one thing, Dan, before so I want people to imagine and think about how bullish PSA feels, and a lot of these companies feel on the demand side of all of these grading card, markets, whether it's sports being the biggest, but also all these other new games coming up. And I think a number of games starting now that there's going to be a push to having those cards being graded too. So we will see if they both get to that that level, but also how effective they are in actually reaching that 20 million. And then if people actually do send that many cards, because the market is able to absorb that much value. If they're grading 20 million cards a year and their price is $10, $12, that means that at least 20 million cards, people need to be making money on those theoretically. I mean, they're going to be collectors sending in their cards too, not looking to make money, but most people send in cards to increase the value of the card also. So that to me is very bullish of PSA, but they're putting a lot of money behind it, and we're going to see what happens. But the numbers we're seeing today, even it gives a very bullish picture of how the number of modern cards and vintage cards and things that have been graded today in Pokemon might look very small in 10 years, 5 years, even 3 years. And if the demand actually is able to absorb all those cards as well, you might see some surprisingly high prices on cards and singles and things that exist right now. Again, I think they're being extremely bullish. I'm a much more cautious conservative estimator on all this sort of thing for me personally. But the picture they're telling here is a very positive one for investing or collecting in Pokemon cards and having them be worth something in the future, is my point in trying to say all of that.
Yeah. And then again, this one here was total cards, and this one just pulls out Pokemon cards specifically. So from 1990, I don't think anyone graded any Pokemon cards between 95 and like 98. And then Gary kind of tore out of the gate with all those CD promos through Home Shopping Network. So 1998-ish through 2019, PSA graded 1 million Pokemon cards. And then by 2020, a 30% increase in 1 year over the prior 20-ish. And then nearly a doubling. I mean, maybe by the time December ends, this could be 2.6. So yeah, again, just 1 year doubling what had been done prior. So you can see that on 30 million, another 7 to 8 million were graded in 1 year, roughly. So overall, the total PSA card graded pool went up by 25%, whereas Pokemon was disproportionately in that amount of new slabs as it doubled. Just again, showing context of Pokemon was disproportionately submitted in 2020 and 2021. So I guess that's an indicator of just how strong and how much demand there is out there for Pokemon cards encased in PSA plastic. I'm going to go to the next tab now. This next tab there's going to be a lot of information in front of you, and I'll just work my way through explaining each part. So again, we have a fairly similar, I might have mixed up my colors here as far as low, medium, and high, but just to start giving you context, this graph starts at January 1st, 2020. Along the bottom, we have the date forecasted out into the future, about 1 year. The end of it is November 2022. And then the y-axis is millions of cards in the backlog. And I'll tell you, every number I have in blue there's a couple estimates in there, but they're all really close. I was updating this on the 24th, which was Friday, I think. And PSA just so happened, 11/24. They just so happened to drop an article with a timestamp on, hey, today we've grown so much. The backlog stands at just north of 11 million cards. So it's not an exact number at the top end, but it's somewhere between 11 and 12. And they mentioned how many employees they had at the time. And so it was just, it refined my data a lot. I think this would have had, instead of being a singular line before that night, it was actually like more of a range. And I had scoped out the bounds to be somewhere between 10 and 15 million. But given that they dropped that article, it allowed me to like pinpoint more data points a lot more closely, because the other most interesting bit of data that they mentioned was the current backlog. And the current backlog stands at 7.5 million cards as of November 24th. I'm not sure. I shared it on my Instagram when I saw it. I didn't see anyone talking about it at the time. I think I happened to see the blog post within a couple hours of it being posted, but I don't think people too frequently keep up on the PSA blog. But yeah, I really enjoyed the timing of that. And getting back to the chart now, the first two data points I have are January 1st, 2020, where I found an actual article saying that they had a 700,000 card backlog to end 2019. So that's like a firm point. This being linear, that's not real, whether there were some bumps and valleys, but this number was real. And then this number was real. So at the start of 2021, we had a backlog that grew 4 million cards to 4.7 million. And the reason that I know that is because from this data back here, PSA stated that they graded 2.8 million cards in 2020. And then there was another article saying that 7.5 million cards were submitted. So you can just do the math there and you come up with the fact that we have 4.7. I mean, thankfully, I was submitting a lot heavily in between July and January. And then personally, my own submissions kind of cooled between January and March. But as you can see, the broader market was exactly the opposite. The broader market submitted a lot through 2020. And then the price increase that everyone was anticipating didn't come in January 1st. I remember Graded Gem, Ludkins, they were telling their dealers, hey, anything you want submitted in 2020 with 2020 pricing, get to us as quick as possible. So like December of 2020, I chucked out thousands of cards to lock in that pricing that I still had access to in January. So one thing I need to say too, just to keep context of all this, PSA was really slow at registering packages at the time. So cards that were physically mailed to them in the fall of 2020 weren't registered oftentimes until the winter of 2020, 2021. So there's kind of like a weird delay in a lot of this data too. But yeah, anyways, Nat mentioned in a podcast, this peak rate here, there's no date down on here, but it's March 31st, 2021. That is the final day where Nat said they literally received 660,000 cards in one day, culminating in them determining that, hey, enough is enough. We're shutting down everything below, what was it at the time, 300 a card. So
a day like that makes you think, 20 million a year doesn't seem too crazy.
It's just funny. Yeah, it's funny. I made a note somewhere too. Yeah. So the rate of submissions between January 1st and March 31st, 7.5 million cards were submitted in that 3-month window. So like extending that out to a month, to a year-long period, that's a 30 million card a year pace demand.
And that was already at a higher rate, right? That was already at the higher price rate.
So prices increased for March. March 1st is when they increased to 20 per card, yeah, if I remember correctly. And then the response to that by the market, you would think doubling the cost would have the demand or at least curb the demand to some extent. But a lot of people saw the writing on the wall. I've got that note right down here. a lot of people saw the writing on the wall that, hey, this is unsustainable. If I get in the queue, I'm going to lock in my grading price. So they just chucked out everything. They forced PSA to close. And this is where we were at. One thing I did put too, like I mentioned that between January and the end of March, there was a 30 million card per year, like surge. A lot of that was to do with people seeing the writing on the wall. I don't think that long term, especially given what prices have done in the past 10, 11 months, I don't think the demand will necessarily be 30 million cards per year forever at $10 a card. I have no idea what they will be. I'm sure Nat has no idea what they will be, but as of that time, that's what it was. I mean, that is literally, we peaked at near 12 million cards. I think this is not like a chart I've seen anywhere else. This is not data I've seen presented in this way anywhere else. And hopefully it's interesting and useful to some people. Again, as with the last sheet, the blue is like getting us to where we are. We are here. We're here where all these colors intersect. And then what I did was I forecasted, in my mind, the best case scenario in yellow. I guess that should have been green in hindsight. I forecasted the likely outcome. I mean, the likely range will be somewhere in between the yellow and the red, but I put the green line there. And then the red is, I don't think people fully believe it or understand it sometimes by the comments I see, and not in this Discord, I would say, but in other Discords on Facebook. PSA should open $10 per card tomorrow. I think the red line is what would happen. Maybe not as bad as if they had kept it open in March or reopened it in June, because prices have come down on a fair few things in the meantime. But we do need to deal with the reality of there's still 7.5 million cards, many of which have been there over a year. And if they reopen tiers too aggressively, there are realities where the red line could happen. And I think that should be avoided at all costs, I hope.
I think the other really key piece is the amount of staff that they're hiring during that. So they could offset, right? If they kept staff the same, we might see something like that happen. If they continue to increase their capacity, they might be able to open up a lower tier quicker and get to those cards quicker. Those are the moving parts that Dan and I can't, accurately forecast. We're just going to have to see how it all plays out in real time. How many cards they're able to kind of churn through, get through a day due to their capacity. But yeah, those are all the moving pieces.